Drones are becoming more and more a part of our daily lives. From having your coffee delivered in Dublin city centre, to having photos of your wedding taken with drones, to having medical supplies transported between hospitals and busy cities. Unfortunately, it's a reality that they're also becoming a critical part of the modern battlefield.
Welcome to EU Defence Declassified, back for a third season and brought to you by the European Defence Agency. This is our podcast where we delve into the rather complex world of EU defence. I'm Robin Emmett, and alongside me is my colleague Liga Lexdinia. We cover everything from military technology to strategy and all of the EDA work in between.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Robin. Today we are talking about drones, unmanned aircraft systems, UAS for short. In this episode, we're looking at how to prepare for the safe and routine use of military drones in a busy sky. We will also be asking how this technology is being used to support Ukraine.
So earlier this year, a German Heron TP drone made history as the first to fly through both civilian and military airspace in Europe's upper skies. That's a big step towards bringing military drones into everyday air traffic. And there are more test flights to come. But if that's a long-term project, there's a lot of work being done with the other smaller drones, like the ones involved in the war in Ukraine.
We're delighted to have two experts joining us. A warm welcome to EDA's Stephen O'Sullivan, Project Officer for UAS Airspace Integration, here with us in Brussels.
Hello, Liga. Hello, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here today.
And we have Mikk Murumäe, Threod Systems Chief Technology Officer. Mikk works with one of Estonia's primary UAS manufacturers and is also a member of the Estonian Defence Forces. He's been directly involved with systems deployed in Ukraine and has extensive experience from both the battlefield and in European exercises.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So let's start with something quite exciting, that Heron TP test flight I mentioned. Stephen, can you tell us what that really shows about getting military drones into civilian airspace?
Many of your listeners will have experienced the congested European skies particularly during the summer while going on vacation. Separate to this challenge of the congestion, we have the requirement from EU militaries to operate more drones more frequently because of the changing geopolitical situation. So what the EDA is attempting to do in support of the member states is to prove and demonstrate that these systems can fly safely, as safe as any other aircraft that you see in the sky, integrated with commercial aircraft, for example, that they can be controlled by military air traffic controllers and also by civil air traffic controllers. And they have some advantages. In some ways, they can even be considered safer, because if you lose contact with a drone, for example, the air traffic controller can actually pick up the phone and phone the pilot who's sitting in an office somewhere in the world. So whereas if you lose contact with a crewed aircraft or a manned aircraft, then you can't contact them. So we're doing that through a series of increasingly complex test flights. Germany, Belgium, Spain, France, for example, are all supporting this with their air forces, with their military aviation authorities, etc. And of course, as well as the military supporting, we have a lot of support on the civil side in the Netherlands, Germany, again, the same countries. So it's exciting. It's exciting to be proving and demonstrating that this technology is safe.
Okay, well, so it's not just about testing the technology, it's about coexisting. But obviously that, as I said, is a long-term objective of EDA and the European Union. And I think today we'd also like to talk a little bit about the smaller tactical UAS that we hear so much about in the news and is evident in Ukraine.
Mikk, tell us, how significant are drones as a technology for the war in Ukraine? And what developments in UAS technology do you predict in the near future?
Yeah, I think unmanned aircraft systems are the primary ISR tools that provide information about enemy forces, their movement, and most importantly, they are the key assets for fire direction in Ukraine today. I think, in short, unmanned aircraft systems have become the eyes of the armies. The challenge is to keep these systems working in an evolving electronic battlefield where new counter-drone technologies and tools are introduced and deployed very quickly. Threod Systems has established a training and maintenance center in Ukraine so we can evaluate the performance of our products based on first-hand information coming directly from the front lines and implement those lessons directly in our R&D department as quickly as possible.
Mikk, you mentioned ISR. What's that exactly?
intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
And without drones, how was that done before?
Well, classically, it's just people looking at the battlefield using binoculars, but any sort of observation method can be classified as ISR. It's just that today the drones are most effective at doing this job at a distance. Basically, they are the new generation of binoculars.
That's really interesting to hear. I feel like it really shows how much we rely on companies behind the scenes.
We were talking about Ukraine, but in the EU, at least for the moment, we're still in peacetime. Stephen, what do you have to say about this idea of creating the right rules, challenges to be in a better position to make the most of this technology? And I wonder, since it is an EDA podcast, tell us a bit about EDA's role.
Absolutely. There are challenges both in terms of technology and the regulatory environment in Europe. But the good news is that a lot has been done in those areas. For example, EDA currently has a project which we call UAS Resolve, whereby we're engaging with our 27 member states to gather their requirements for UAS or drones. And we're matching that to what industry or companies are able to offer. And so we're creating a catalogue for member states to be able to procure and to guide industry or companies as they go forward producing and manufacturing these technologies. Separately, on the regulatory side, one of our core roles at EDA is to represent the member states' militaries with the various regulatory policy defining bodies within the EU. So we work closely hand in hand with EASA, the Civil Regulatory Agency for Aviation, whereby we bring them the concerns, the views of our member states' militaries, so that as civil aviation regulations are developed, particularly around drones, which is a fast-moving area, that they're considering the military's points of view and enabling the military to support, but also to operate effectively as these new regulations are developed.
And how exactly does cross-border testing help build confidence between military and civilian authorities?
Good question. So the more we expose both the civil and the military air traffic controllers and all of the various stakeholders that we have in Europe to control civil and military aviation, the more they're exposed to drones, then becomes more commonplace. So initially, say, for example, 10 years ago, drones were pretty rare in the skies, and one drone to fly, for example, in higher airspace, quite high, was a big challenge. But now what the EDA is doing is, in conjunction with the German Air Force, soon with the Belgian Air Force, previously with the Spanish and the French militaries, is that we conduct a series of test flights where we fly these drones, first controlled by the military, then controlled by civil air traffic control in various different types of airspace alongside civil aircraft. And so the more exposure that the various stakeholders get to these flights, then it becomes more commonplace. And you're proving and demonstrating that these systems are quite safe.
Mikk, from your experience in Ukraine, what lessons have drones taught us about operating in contested airspace or environments with heavy jamming or spoofing?
In heavily contested airspace, it's basically impossible to rely on conventional GNSS navigation signals, and the only option is to use alternative methods. Today, solutions like visual navigation, optical flow, radio navigation, enhanced inertial systems, and others are being utilized and continuously developed and adapted to provide precise navigation capabilities in drones utilized on the battlefield. Of course, other technologies are also being researched, technologies that make use of quantum effects to increase the sensitivity and precision of magnetic and inertial sensors to provide affordable and lightweight inertial navigation solutions. Additionally, space-based systems such as Starlink and communication satellite constellations are being utilized for navigation as well. So perhaps this is where Europe can also learn and take cues from the Americans, for example, how to utilize some of the technologies that we already have for enhanced navigation capabilities in potential conflicts. Another topic is, of course, the data links and the communication between the ground control station and the aircraft itself when active jamming is by the enemies.
Oh, thanks, Mikk. So sounds like the EU has a lot to learn from real-world operations. Obviously, Ukraine is doing it in a war, but here in the EU, we are learning lessons, if you like, from Ukraine. Stephen, I wondered, how are the lessons being implemented, learned best from here in the EU?
It's no secret that the EU is playing a game of catch-up. And so what the member states are doing is they're engaged with our Ukrainian colleagues on a regularly, almost daily basis, taking the lessons that they're learning and trying to bring them back to European armies to be better prepared for the future. Where the EDA is helping in that regard is we have created a working group with our member states that we've called the UAS Operational Users Working Group. So it's aimed at the operational users of the drones, the people on the ground who will be actually flying these systems. And with our Ukrainian colleagues, we're exploring an effort to create essentially a centre of excellence in Europe. It may be in one country, it may be dispersed across many countries, but the idea is to share costs, to increase efficiency, and to harmonise the European Union's tactics, techniques and procedures, or TTPs, for the use of all various different classes of drones. In that regard, we have Latvia, for example, who have come forward and volunteered to be a lead nation initially for this exciting endeavour. And so the momentum is building, and Europe is certainly trying to catch up now.
That makes me think a bit about EDA's training schools in other areas. I remember the EDA had a very successful helicopter training program. Are you saying there could be something similar but for drones?
Exactly. So one of the flagship projects coming out of the EDA in recent years has been the Multinational Helicopter Training Centre, now based in Portugal. And what that did was it gathered European militaries together and taught advanced helicopter tactics. And so we're looking to do the same thing for drones.
And I'll put you on the spot a bit here, but what would be an example of something you'd learned from Ukraine? Could it be, for instance, I'm just guessing, but how to fly drones when the global navigation systems are not available?
Exactly. So Mikk alluded to this earlier in the podcast. So certainly flying in GNSS-denied environments is a new domain. Traditionally, armies based everything on the fact that we would have GPS or GNSS systems. So that is a new learning. Another area that we're learning quickly is deploying weapons or deploying explosive devices, etc., from smaller types of UAS. And then on the other side is protecting yourself from that. So using novel types of camouflage, for example, so that the thermal sensors on these small drones can't detect your troops as they hide, for example.
For companies like Threod Systems, how does real-world experience in Ukraine influence how drones are designed and deployed here in Europe?
In Threod, we have implemented multiple lessons learned directly from the Ukrainian battlefield that have helped us to counter spoofing and jamming. Threod has its own instructors and a service center close to the battlefield where we can take feedback daily and implement those things in our R&D. Features that we have implemented based on our Ukrainian experience are today being used by Threod customers to protect European borders. Multiple border protection agencies from European Union are using Threod's products, enhanced with the lessons learned from Ukraine.
You mentioned border protection. So are you saying that the EU's Frontex uses drones?
We have sold directly to the member states' border protection agencies. So they probably cooperate with Frontex as well. But multiple nations who have an eastern border with Russia to utilize our aircraft systems.
And just could you say a word? I mean, how would those drones be used? Would it also be for surveillance or?
Mainly for surveillance to detect what is happening in the border area, to see if illegal immigration is happening or weaponized immigration.
Yeah. So it's not just about technology. I mean, it's also about, we've heard that it's about people, rules and trust as well. Sadly, our time's up, but I was wondering, Stephen and Mikk, if there's one thing about the future of drones in European skies that you'd like our listeners to remember, what might it be? Stephen?
Drones are becoming more and more a part of our daily lives. From having your coffee delivered in Dublin city centre, to having photos of your wedding taken with drones, to having medical supplies transported between hospitals and busy cities. Unfortunately, it's a reality that they're also becoming a critical part of the modern battlefield. Europe has a lot of work to do to continue integrating this technology into legacy military structures, also in Europe into the ability to move equipment across Europe, so military mobility. But I think the takeaway is that a lot of work is being done, progress is being made, and we're there to support Ukraine and to learn from them as they move forward. Mikk, interested in your take on this?
Yeah, I think drones are here to stay, and in some applications they will make our lives easier, and in others they can make our lives more difficult and bring challenges that we have to overcome.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you to our guests, Stephen and Mikk. We hope you enjoyed EU Defence Declassified. For more information on our work, visit EDA's website at eda.europa.eu and check out our magazine, European Defence Matters. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for more episodes.